Hello, everybody. We are live. All right. Today we got a great show. We're mostly going to be covering Palestine. I recently finished Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality, which I need to do a book review for now that I think about it. But I've also been reading Michael Parenti's book about entertainment media, make-believe media, which focuses on movies and TV shows and the way that Americans are brainwashed through them. So we'll talk about that a little bit because obviously there's tons of overlap with when we're talking about the media and propaganda, and when we're talking about the Israeli apartheid state. But first, before I jump into our intro, I see a question here from Cristino Almonte. Thank you for being with us, Cristino. I really want to start reading material. Can anyone send links to free online like Lenin's Imperialism? Yes. Not only do I have a full book review or full book summary and breakdown of Lenin's Imperialism right here on the Midwestern Marx YouTube channel that's designed to help people who don't have access to the book to understand the book. But everybody should have access to the book because it's available online. And at MidwesternMarx.com, we have our own online library, which I am getting right now. Marxism.org is another good one. I see Sebastian put that up. A lot of the stuff in the Midwestern Marx online library is literally just going to be linking you to Marxism.org. Because they're a great resource. But yeah, tons of audiobooks. A lot of the theoretical, major theoretical texts are free. You can literally read Capital online, which might be a little bit difficult because it's a hard book. For me, I don't know about y'all, but for me, like the harder books, I have to be sitting down with a pen in my hand. Otherwise, it's really difficult for me to focus. Easy books I can read online or read on my iPad, but Capital, I don't think I could read it online. That would be tough. Hey, comrades. Hey, everybody. Saw you were live on Twitter. Yeah, I cut the stream because I saw you were live on Twitter. No notification. Dang it. YouTube is 100% suppressing us. We know that. What's up, Sebastian? But yeah, glad you guys found your way here. Make sure to like and share the stream. That helps boost us in the algorithm, as does when you guys interact with the chat. Helps boost us in this algorithm that we know for a fact is suppressing anti-imperialist content. Recently, not only was Jackson Hinkle, well, I think Jackson was completely banned, but Richard Medhurst as well, getting demonetized. So please go follow Richard Medhurst on Rumble if you haven't yet. Got to support our comrades, rally around them when they get censored. But thank you so much, Ross, for the super sticker. I appreciate that. I need to get on Buy Me a Coffee. I know you've been buying me some coffees. I got to remember to get on there and thank you, but been loving your blog lately, Ross. I read it every day, whenever you publish something new. It's become sort of a fun habit for me to go to your blog and read what you have to say. And, you know, usually me and Carlos and the stuff we've been talking about at Midwestern Marx are mentioned in your blog. So I just really appreciate reading that and reading your reaction to the world events and the content that we're pushing. Reading Carlos's book right now. Nice. Matt Hirsch put out a part 2 of his analysis. It's really good. Maybe we'll check that out today. We've got a lot of sources, a lot of information to cover today. I should probably jump into our intro because I am not going to be able to stream for hours and hours today. I have practice tonight. 3 practices tonight, actually. But I'll deal with that when it comes. For now, let's get into the intro and have a great stream, everybody.
about a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
All right. Just writing a few things in my notes here before we get going. Damn, good luck, LMAO. Thank you, Sebastian. It's like this every week. Usually, I coach and wrestle, so usually there's at least one practice where I don't have to actually wrestle. But this Monday, I had to do 4 practices. I had to wrestle the entire time, all 4 practices. And in the morning, we did a 45-minute live go. 45 minutes of hard wrestling all out, which, if you don't know, a normal wrestling match is 6 to 7 minutes long. Right? So imagine multiplying that by 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, multiplying it by like 7.5 times of what a normal match is. I had to do that and then wrestle 3 more times. I was exhausted, but moral of the story, you do hard things. It makes you a harder person. It makes you tougher. We are forged in the struggle, as Che Guevara would say. So doing 4 practices today ain't nothing for your boy. As long as I don't have to wrestle in all of them, which I probably will, but even then, whatever. Dang, Eddie, that's wild. We're grinding out here, Victor the Van. We are grinding out here. I mean, the way I look at it, especially as a Marxist, like, wrestling is what I love. Wrestling is what I absolutely love to do. I would choose to wrestle even if I wasn't, didn't make any money from it. And so many people spend every waking second of their day having their labor exploited, doing something that they don't like, doing something that's alienating. So even though I have to work hard and I have to work long hours while still managing to find Midwestern Marx time, I love it. I'm doing what I love. So I'm extremely grateful in that aspect. I remember my dad would tell me about when sweatsuits were still legal. They would have garbage can in the corner because everyone would always stop to yak. That's messed up. That is messed up. You can also use a garbage bag as a makeshift sweatsuit. You just poke your head and arms through, but they're illegal. So I would never, ever, ever, ever do that. Never, ever, ever have I been in a garbage bag at midnight on an Airdyne bike, sucking water out of my body. That is quite the badass sweater. Thank you. It's one of my favorites. It's a thrift shop cop. When I first got it, I was like, this thing is ridiculous. I'll never wear this. This looks like something my grandma would wear. And then every time I put it on, I'm like, it doesn't look bad. And then I go out and people are like, that's a fly sweater. I'm like, okay, I guess it is. I really want to thank you guys for facilitating the creation of such an amazing community. With all of the comrades I've met in the classes, we started a reading group and a great WhatsApp chat. That is awesome. That is so cool to hear. Thank you for being part of this community. I agree that that's my favorite part of what Midwestern Marx is doing, is building a real coalition of dedicated and competent people. A real coalition of people who are not involved in this because they, I don't know, are bored and like online drama and like online clout, or see the left as a social group, even though, we do want to create a community that is a social group, right? We want to be each other's friends and each other's support systems and have a cohesive group socially. But what we're all mostly focused on is achieving political power for the working class, right? We are at Midwestern Marx trying to recruit and create a competent group, a competent community of people who are invested in helping the working class to seize political power and who are willing to sacrifice and work hard to do so, which is what I feel like we have in all of you. And if you want to be part of our Discord too, patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. If you're a $1 Discord supporter, or if you're a $1 Patreon supporter, we'll let you in the Discord for life. And there are lots of people in that Discord who we've appointed to help manage things and help people learn, help answer questions for people, help answer theoretical questions, have debates. So it's a really good community. I like what we're doing. It's when I see what's going on right now, and obviously the genocide in Gaza is horrific to watch. And all of our Twitter timelines right now are filled with the most horrific images and videos imaginable. But it is uniting people against the American empire. And we are seeing, a real resurgence of socialism and communism in this country, a real resurgence of anti-imperialism and, It's not just this outsider weird communism isn't just this outsider sort of weird ideology, anti-American ideology anymore. There's a real American communist movement that's still in its embryo, but it is growing and it is real. So I like to think that we have some sort of part in that. But anyways, moving on to our first story of the day. What are Israel's plans for Gaza? Why is Israel inflicting this collective punishment on the people of Gaza, and what is their end goal? They tell us that their end goal is to fight Hamas, to take out the terrorist groups. We know that Israel has been carpet bombing civilians, hitting hospitals, hitting refugee camps, hitting mosques, and claiming that Hamas is hiding in these places, but thousands and thousands of civilians are being killed, nearly 3,000 children at this point and 8,000 civilians. That's just reported from Western sources. It's likely that the numbers are much, much, much higher than that. So a lot of people are asking, what is Israel's end game here? What does Israel actually want? And recently there was a document that leaked from Israeli intelligence from the Mossad, saying that Israel plans to expel 2 million Palestinians from Gaza into Egypt's Sinai Desert. Starting with northern Gaza, they want to displace 2 million Palestinians and make them Egypt's problem. Move them off of the Gaza Strip so Israel can occupy the Gaza Strip like they've wanted to for a long time, with Palestinian Arabs being there who they right now are systematically depriving of political rights. But this is wild. It's wild, but it's why a lot of people call what Israel's doing an ongoing Nakba, right? Or we often call it settler colonialism because they're just continually expanding onto Gaza, or I mean Palestinians' territory. And we've all seen that map that shrinks, from year to year with the 1967 war. And then with the increased Israeli settlements, there's been less and less Palestinian land and more Israeli land, right? So the Nakba is this event in 1948 or 1949 where the Israeli state was first founded on the British mandate, which was Britain had colonized Palestine and were controlling it as a colony. And the Israeli state was founded essentially on top of Palestine. And all these settlers and militant groups came in and started forcing the Arabs off their land, forcing the Palestinians off the land that they had lived on for thousands of years. This put 70 to 75% of Palestinian Arabs in refugee status. Now, over 70% of people from this region at that point were no longer living on their homeland. They were considered refugees. Now, since this point, Israel has continued displacing Palestinians, continued building illegal settlements, and continued expanding the borders of what is known as Israel. So this plan to expel 2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip makes perfect sense within the broader context and the broader project that Israel's been working on for years and what Israel's been doing for years. It's just been expelling Palestinians, kicking them off of their homes, or Syrians in certain cases, and trying to expand Israeli territory, trying to build these Jewish settlements on top of places where there were Arab settlements. And if they were to grant Arabs political rights, if they were to grant the Palestinians political rights, there'd be more Palestinians than there would be Jewish people, and the state of Israel, as we know it today, would cease to exist. So Israel is actually dependent upon enforcing an apartheid, systematically depriving Palestinian Arabs of their human rights. And the more Palestinians and Arabs that they can drive off of the land, the better it is for them. The more political control Netanyahu and these far-right Israeli Zionists and extremists that are in the government now, which we'll cover later, the more power they have and the less resistance they have. That's why they call it mowing the grass, which is the disgusting term that they've given to when they launch missiles that kill Palestinian civilians. Call it mowing the grass, keeping the population down so there's not too many of them. It's completely disgusting. And recently we published a video from our buddy, friend of the show, amazing researcher, author, and journalist, Dan Kovalic. He published a video about what Israel is trying to do in displacing 2 million Palestinians. We already published it on the Midwestern Marks YouTube here, But I figured for those who haven't seen it, we'll just react to it right now because it's real short and real good. Be sure to like and share the stream to get this information out there. It's very important. Now, let's have Dan Kovalic fill our brains with knowledge.
As I record this on October 31st, things continue to deteriorate, not only in Gaza, but the West Bank. And we really need to talk about what are the plans of Israel for Palestine, not only Gaza, but the West Bank. First of all, we should focus on Gaza. This is not a war against Hamas. This is not a war. What Israel is planning to do, and we saw some plans that were actually leaked to the public. Israel's had longstanding plans to remove a large part of the population, probably over half of the population of Gaza, so that would be well over 1 million people, and push them into Egypt's Sinai Desert. This would be a colossal ethnic cleansing, which, again, Israel's clearly preparing to do. Everything they're doing is moving in that direction. They are destroying the northern part of Gaza, making it completely uninhabitable. In fact, reports I've heard is that it is uninhabitable at this point. So moving everyone into the south, and then they're going to try to push, again, a large swath of the people then in the south into out of Palestine and Israel into Egypt and into the desert, where they will have tents for people to live in. And again, part of the way they're going to do that also, in addition to making the north uninhabitable, they're brutalizing the south. They're saying, go to the south of Gaza, you'll be safe, but they're not safe. They are bombing the south to smithereens as well. They're going to make that also uninhabitable.
But Ben Shapiro keeps saying they told the Palestinians to leave. They told the people in Gaza to leave. How can you blame the Israelis for bombing them? Well, because they're in an open-air prison, Ben. They're in an open-air prison. There's nowhere to go. There is nowhere to go. And if they leave northern Gaza to southern Gaza, the way Israel said, it doesn't matter. Because as Kovalic pointed out, Israel's carpet bombing the damn place. They're hitting South Gaza, too. They're hitting people on the West Bank, too. There are over 100 civilians and 30 children killed in the West Bank, a place where Hamas doesn't even have any presence. Right? There's nowhere for these people to run. But it doesn't matter. The Zionists like Ben Shapiro will justify anything. Anything. And, history will look back on them as apologists for genocide.
Going to kill thousands of people. At the time of this video, at least.
They also keep stressing that Israel's only targeting Hamas. Right? This is what the propagandists like Shapiro are saying. It's just to get rid of Hamas. Everything's to get rid of Hamas. They bombed a hospital. Hamas was hiding underneath it. Literally, that's what they're saying. It's like we have this leaked document from Israeli intelligence now saying the plan is not to destroy Hamas, not to infiltrate Hamas and get rid of Hamas or groups that are deemed terrorist groups. No, the plan is to displace the Palestinians, not Hamas, Palestinians, 2 million of them, including 1 million children. The plan is to take them and move them to a different place so Israel doesn't have to deal with them. It's like when Patrick Star in SpongeBob says, why don't we take Bikini Bottom and move it over here? Only way more genocidal.
At least 8,000 people in Gaza, almost half of them children, have been killed by the Israelis. Certainly that number is much, much higher. We have no idea of all the people under the rubble who are dead. No idea the numbers of people who died from the lack of water, food, medicine for over 3 weeks. This is an abomination that the U.S. is funding, providing military assistance for. It needs to end.
So there you go. There's Professor Dan Kovalic giving a great analysis of what's going on. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious. It couldn't be more obvious that this is genocide, that this is ethnic cleansing. And where are all these people at, like Destiny, right? Destiny kept posting the Palestinian population statistics and saying, look, the population is going up. They're breeding faster than Israel can kill them. How could you call this a genocide? How could you call this an ethnic cleansing? How could you call this a mass displacement of Palestinian people? Dude, the Israeli intelligence themselves are saying that their plan is to displace 2 million Palestinian people en masse. That is their plan. We know that now. These documents have leaked. So are these folks like Destiny going to come out and apologize and say, okay, you know what? I said this wasn't an ethnic cleansing, but now we know explicitly that Israel wants to move 2 million Palestinian Arabs off of their land and replace it with Jewish settlements. Right? What else do you call that other than genocide and ethnic cleansing? No, they won't come out and say they're wrong. They won't retract what they're saying because they're not actually looking at this in a fact-based way, or they're not actually looking at, I mean, there is no objectivity, right? So it's not that they need to look at it objectively, but they're working backwards from their conclusion, right? The media says it's the good liberal position to fight Israel. Israel's fighting against terrorism. Okay, I support Israel and everything that they do. I'm going to justify everything Israel does. Anything the Palestinian Health Ministry says, that's Hamas propaganda, right? The Palestinian Health Ministry says 3,000 children are dead. Destiny says, nope, that's not true. That's Hamas propaganda. The Israeli authorities say something, and that dum-dum gobbles it up. Oh my goodness, they must be telling the truth. He literally said the other day that Israel is not an expansionist state because every time Israel has expanded their borders and seized Palestinian land, the Arabs attacked first. The Arabs attacked us first. The Palestinians attacked us first. We had to demolish their homes and build illegal settlements that are illegal under international law on top of where their homes used to be, or just straight up stealing their homes outright, which we've seen a lot of settlers do in the past years. Nope, that was all justified because some Palestinian child threw a rock, at an Israeli sniper. So we're allowed to demolish thousands of Palestinian homes and build literally hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlements on top of them, which is what's been going on, which we'll cover in a later segment here. Genocide is not just murder, but the attempted destruction of a group's culture, religion, and identity. Exactly. So, the Israelis can't kill Palestinians as fast as the Palestinians can have children, right? That does not debunk the idea that Israel is trying to do ethnic cleansing or that Israel is trying to do a genocide, right? Just because they're not super efficient at doing genocide or they're not doing genocide with the snap of a finger doesn't mean it's not genocide, right? It's a slow process of settler colonialism and ethnic cleansing with the end goal of pushing millions of Palestinians off of their native land, their homeland, and taking it. That is settler colonialism. That is ethnic cleansing. That is Israel trying to destroy Palestinian culture, trying to destroy the Palestinian civilization, or at least just move it somewhere else. Squidward is a comrade. True. Eddie, have you seen the SpongeBob episode where Squidward and SpongeBob go on strike? I have. It's been a long time, but I know at some point I've seen every SpongeBob episode. I used to really like that. Be sure to like and share the stream, everybody. Appreciate all of you being here. It helps when you leave comments in the chat, when you like the stream, when you share the stream. It boosts us in the YouTube algorithm. And also be sure to subscribe if you have not yet. Can we stop it? All we can do is mobilize and organize, right? Do we have the power to bring an end to it and bring an end to this imperialist aggression right now? It doesn't seem that way. It seems like Biden and the ruling class is completely ignoring the demands of the American people. Karine Jean-Pierre, Biden's press secretary, called advocates for a ceasefire and advocates for peace disgraceful and repugnant, right? So they think people calling for peace are disgraceful. So we can get organized. We can organize protests. We can demand something change. But, ultimately, we need more organization than what we have now. We need to be able to call for a general strike. We need to be able to shut the economy down. We need a more organized working class if we're going to demand anything. Because ultimately, this is a conflict that is driven by capitalist imperialism. Ultimately, Israel exists and is allowed to act with impunity and with all this U.S. funding because U.S. multinationals, the leaders of the U.S. economy, the owners of the U.S. economy, and the politicians that they control want a neo-colonial outpost in West Asia, in the so-called Middle East. They want Israel to protect their economic and political interests, to launch missiles at their enemy whenever they want it, right? So it's important to understand that this isn't the religious Jewish versus Muslim conflict that the media portrays it to be, right? It's rooted in political economy. It's rooted in the imperialist stage of capitalism that we live in, where capitalist imperialists, multinationals, bankers, and what Lenin calls finance capital, when they try to dominate the world and exploit the world for resources and cheap labor, right? That is why the British and the US have funded the Zionist project since the outset. They want a neo-colonial outpost in the Middle East, ultimately to protect their economic interests. So, how do we fight capitalism? The source of all this pain and suffering and genocide? We fight capitalism through class struggle, through organizing the working masses who make up the vast majority of the population and organizing them against the state, which is controlled by the corporations, the capitalists, the finance capitalists, and against the finance capitalists themselves. You organize people in the workplace. You organize people in your community. You educate people and organize them ideologically, like we're doing right now with this stream, right? That's what we need. But we need a much higher level of organization before we can really threaten political power and really force change in this country. And change must be forced. Change must be forced. That's why I like all these videos coming out telling Joe Biden that nobody's going to vote for him if he continues to sponsor genocide. Yes, that is what we need to do. That is what we need to do. And all these people who are saying, yeah, I feel bad about the Palestinians, but I'm still going to vote for Joe because Trump bad. You're missing it. You don't get it. You don't get it. You don't get that both parties are two sides of the same coin. They're two sides of the ruling class. They work together in that way. So one party can literally commit genocide and you'll say, whatever, they still have my vote. They still have my unconditional support because they're less mean than the other party because I like the other party less. Right? That it's so stupid. You need to threaten the ruling class and you need to threaten their power, right? You need to say, Joe Biden, your party is hardly any different from the Republicans. I'm not voting for you because you're committing a genocide. If you promise to stop committing a genocide, stop funding Israel, then maybe I'll vote for you, right? But they're never going to give you anything if you beg, right? If we beg and we say, Joe, please, I'll still vote for you, but could you please stop genociding the Palestinians? He's going to be like, don't care. Suck it. Do not care as long as I'm still in power. As long as they still have their wealth and power, they'll continue to do what they do. Fight capitalism by not believing their propaganda. That too, ideological and ideological education, really, and just education in general about geopolitics, because Americans are absolutely politically illiterate, right? So any education is good, and that's why this internet stuff, I know it's all online, and online organizing means nothing unless you take it offline, unless we all actually go do stuff offline. But there's a lot that can be done through the internet, man. The internet's a huge tool. We've changed a lot of people's minds through TikTok. We brought a lot of people together through TikTok behind Palestine. We've exposed a lot of Zionist lies through TikTok, and even more through our streams, and even more through the classes that Carlos and Danny and Noah have been running, where they really, really, really help educate people ideologically. We've also helped recruit a lot of new people to the left and to our streams where people can educate themselves further. So the online stuff, the internet is a tool. View it as a tool for class struggle. This is literally neocon aggression from the 2000s, but liberals are doing it. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It does. Biden sounds no different from George Bush at this point, right? Talking about how anybody who opposes the Iraq war is disgusting and repugnant and against America and anti-Semitic. Sounds just like the Bush administration. It's pure psychotic warmongering. Really, one of the people from Electric Intifada, I believe it's called, said like these people worship war. It seems like they literally are sexually attracted to war sometimes. But anyways, let's move on to our next segment. Hold on, sorry, one more question from Sebastian. The ruling class would be putting so much money and effort into controlling the information space if this wasn't an important battle to wage. Absolutely, yes. There wouldn't be so many efforts to control TikTok and control the internet and censor people like us and censor Jackson Hinkle and censor Richard Medhurst if they didn't think the internet was important. If the ruling class didn't think the internet was important, they wouldn't care enough to censor it, which obviously they do. So that tells you everything that you need to know. But anyways, we just covered Dan Kovalic, great researcher and author, friend of the show. We've interviewed him on here. I've read his book about Venezuela. It is a fantastic book. He's written some other fantastic books too. So, friend of Midwestern Marx. He allows us to republish all of his short videos on Midwestern Marx on our TikTok and on our YouTube, which have been doing really well. I know the audience appreciates those. But recently, Dan went viral because he confronted John Fetterman, the senator from, is he from Pennsylvania or Ohio? I can't remember, but either way, he's really never worked a job, like a real working class job in his life, but he wears a Carhartt and he wears basketball shorts and he tries to portray himself as a working class figure, as a real blue collar guy. That's what the Democratic strategists have sort of dressed him up as, this blue collar hero, even though he's never worked a blue collar job that I know of. At least his Wikipedia page doesn't talk about one. But anyways, Fetterman, I believe he's a senator, or he's a congressman. What is he actually? Let me look that up. That's worth knowing. Senator. So he's a senator. He's been a staunch supporter of Israel. He said that we need to support Israel basically unconditionally, give them whatever they need, and has condemned Palestine and any of the activist protesters or politicians who are standing with Palestine. So Dan Kovalic bought tickets to Fetterman's event. So he was legally allowed to be there, had paid to be there, and tried to ask him questions because, we are supposed to live in a democracy where freedom of speech is protected under the law and under the Constitution. So as a voter, as one of John Fetterman's constituents, Fetterman should have to listen to Kovalic because Kovalic is the people and Fetterman is the politician who's supposed to serve the people. But do you think John Fetterman actually listened to Dan Kovalic and gave him a well-reasoned response? Let's find out.
Why don't you support a humanitarian ceasefire?
I'm with the Socialist team. If you like, I can talk to you.
No, I can talk to. I voted for him. I'm sorry, this is a democracy.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, but kind of, sort of. Why? 10,000 people in Gaza have been killed, half are children. The Pope's calling for a ceasefire. The UN has called for it. I'm just asking you. You're a good guy. I voted for you. I know you're a nice guy. This is important. You need to leave. Here, can I give you a phone? I ask you a question.
He just assaulted him. You need to leave.
Insane.
He just assaulted him.
Look, they even have Fetterman's bodyguard dressed up in the Carhartt. I should have worn my Carhartt sweater for today. Look, they're all working class. They're wearing Carhartts. They're allowed to beat up their actual working class constituents.
He just assaulted him.
That was absolutely assault, by the way. That is absolutely what that was. Kovalic was, he was close to Fetterman. Like, he was almost not up in his face, I would say. He was close to him. It sounded like it was loud in there. But he was not being threatening in any way. He was trying to hand Fetterman a pamphlet. He was trying to educate Fetterman. And, in a democracy, you would think the people would be allowed to ask questions of the politicians who are supposed to serve the people, especially if you paid to be there. He paid to be there. And when he asks the politician a question, he gets forcefully escorted from the premises. And imagine if this happened in China. Imagine if this happened in Iran. This video would be all over the corporate news media. They would say, look at this. In Iran and China, you can't even talk to politicians without getting forcefully removed and thrown out. But when it happens in the U.S., not a peep from the U.S. media, who are supposed to be the government watchdog, which is hilarious to even say because we know they're not. All right, but they won't even make a peep about politicians throwing their constituents out on the street for asking questions about genocide, which is being sponsored by our tax dollars.
He assaulted him. He was just talking to him. He's assaulted him.
It was the business owner of the restaurant that attacked him. Interesting. Interesting how capital sides with the politicians who protect capital. So yeah, shout out to Dan Kovalic for that. Hope he was okay. Looked like he was all right there, but literally got assaulted for trying to stand up against genocide. Now, thankfully, there was an article that got published about it, which Mr. Kovalic posted here. So at least some of the mainstream media did cover this. They didn't cover it. They didn't, write headlines that make Fetterman look really bad, which they probably should have. But pressure grows on John Fetterman to end his support for slaughter and hashtag Gaza. And this is from NBC News. They say John Fetterman faces a left-wing backlash over his stance on Israel. He isn't budging. What a badass. He isn't budging. What a hero. What a hero. Even when we told him that, hey, John, you're supporting genocide. Hey, John, one kid is being killed every 15 minutes and you're cheering it on from the safety of your home in the United States. Even though he knows that information now, he still hasn't backed down. He'll still support genocide no matter who tells him to stop. What a badass. Fuck this guy. I called it with this guy from the beginning. You know how many times I got jumped on and attacked on TikTok because I said this guy is a shill for imperialism. This guy is a shill for the U.S. ruling class. And I made fun of him for wearing his Carhartt sweater and pretending to be working class, even though he's never had a working class job in his life. A bunch of people got mad at me. Like, how could you do this? Don't you know he had a stroke? Yeah, I hope he heals up, but he's also sponsoring genocide. So, and then Fetterman went on to say, Fetterman had said in the past that the phrase free Palestine is reprehensible. Reprehensible. That's almost as bad as Karine Jean-Pierre saying that people calling for peace are disgusting and repugnant. This is a close second. People who want Palestine to be free, people who want Palestinian Arabs to have their homeland and to be able to live freely without having a violent, brutal, horrific apartheid enforced on them, are reprehensible, he says. It's so much projection. It's such projection as the people sponsoring a genocide are calling us reprehensible, disgusting, and repugnant. These are all the perfect words to describe the U.S. ruling class. And these politicians who are nothing but simps to finance capital, who have no backbone, who have sold their soul long ago, and are now sponsoring genocide at the behest of the military-industrial complex, the Israeli lobby, and the other capitalist powers that be. So here's Fetterman's response to all the recent backlash because he's a sponsor of genocide.
So you came out that you're against the ceasefire? Why is that?
Oh, come on. Now it's not going to load.
I am really about making sure that Israel is able to do what Israel deserves to do.
What they deserve to do. He is about making sure Israel gets to do what they deserve to do. This is at a time where he, and all the other U.S. politicians are sending Israel $8 billion as they're killing one kid, one child, one little toddler, one little baby every 15 minutes. They're killing a kid every 15 minutes. They're bombing hospitals. And you're going to say, oh, I don't really know much about it. Just let them do what they deserve to do. They deserve to bomb hospitals. They deserve to bomb mosques. What are you talking about, you sick bastard? You are sick. Nobody deserves to do a genocide. Nobody deserves to live in an open-air prison and watch their friends and their schoolmates and their parents and their brothers and sisters get blown up by missiles handed over to Israel by the most powerful empire in the history of the world, the United States.
And I agree for the death of any innocent civilian, Palestinian, Israeli, and whatever it is.
Then stop sending the Israelis money. You can't say Israel deserves to kill 3,000 kids and then turn around and say, I'm against the killing of civilians. You are funding the killing of civilians.
But right now, I want to make sure we're concerned with making sure the hostages are back home and that we are able to neutralize and eliminate Hamas.
I saw yesterday that you wrote on Twitter somebody had posted outside of Taylor Alderdice High School some graffiti that said "Free Palestine." You said this was reprehensible. Why did you object to it so much?
I think it's because, I mean, doesn't that be said from
coping mechanism for cognitive dissonance? It is. It is. That's what these talking points are in a lot of ways. It's politicians being able to push the guilt off. Push off the guilt. No. I haven't sponsored the murder, the slaughter of 1 million kids. Or I'm sorry, not 1 million, but they want to displace 1 million kids. I haven't sponsored the slaughter of 3,000 kids. I've only sponsored the fight against Hamas, the righteous fight against Hamas, and that's what I'm all about. Yeah, just because you say it doesn't make it true, John. You are a sponsor of genocide and you have blood on your hands. And I hope for the rest of your life, until you are dying of old age, I hope people come up to you and remind you that when 3,000 kids were being slaughtered in Gaza, probably more, that when a genocide was being committed, you stood with the people committing the genocide. You stood with the imperialists who were mass murdering children. Those were the people you sided with. And you smeared and attacked and shit on the people fighting against it and called them reprehensible. And I hope nobody ever lets you forget that from now until the day that you die. Same with all of these horrific politicians. If they live to be 101 like Henry Kissinger, I hope people are still coming up to them at the end of their lives and reminding them that they are horrific war criminals who deserve to be tried at the Hague.
the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I don't believe that whatever message you're able to make shouldn't be vandalized on a high school in the middle of Squirrel Hill. And, the appointment and the statement.
Yeah, heaven forbid the youth of this country actually get politically involved. Heaven forbid the youth actually learn what's going on and try and organize something. How could they do that to the poor school building? You know how many school buildings you've bombed, you stupid shit? Oh no, somebody graffitied Free Palestine on a school building. You're bombing school buildings. What's this moral false equivalence here, John? You're allowed to blow up little kids as they go to school and blow up their teachers and say, oh, they were Hamas, but then somebody can't spray paint Free Palestine on a school building? Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense if you're an arrogant narcissist who believes that you're in the right while you're sponsoring or supporting a genocide.
That I want to make is about, to me, really, it's very much about the hostages and getting them back home safe.
So you think it's inappropriate to have pro-Palestine? I mean, there was recently a number of surviving congregants from that congregation that went to the West Bank that spoke out against the occupation.
Why is he on his phone, too? That makes this worse. Like, dude, you just assaulted one of your constituents for asking you questions. Now he's on his phone. Unless it's something that helps him, unless he's using some kind of app that helps him communicate because of the stroke that he had. But if that's not what he's doing, this seems super disrespectful and condescending.
I'm Jewish. There's certainly many people in my family that are against the occupation.
Sure.
I mean, what do you feel about the Jews like myself who feel that we're doing onto the Palestinians what was done onto us?
Reasonable people can have different opinions on that. I've been very clear on mine before I became senator as a candidate, and everybody understands how I'm going to come down and vote.
We have a difference of opinion. Yeah, you do. You're pro-genocide. He's anti-genocide. That's the difference of opinion. Right? And this isn't something where you just shrug your shoulders and say, well, I guess we have a difference of opinion here. Yeah, but I'm going to keep voting for genocide. Sorry about it. Scum. Another example of when a left-wing person gets into a seat of power and uses a prop. Yeah, and he's always been that dude. Don't let him trick you. Like, I know he wears a Carhartt and he dresses like a working-class person because some Democratic staffers told him to. This guy has never had a real job in his life. Look into his career. Right? He's a career politician. It's like AOC. Maybe she worked as a bartender for like a month, but before that, she was being primed to be a politician. And And the gray zone people called that from the beginning. I called that from the beginning. We said this guy Fetterman is not it. And I really got attacked on TikTok for that, even by people who normally like my content. Like, how could you say this about Fetterman? He's such a good guy. Haven't you seen he wears a Carhartt sweater? I'm like, yeah, but when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to every major geopolitical issue, he sides with the U.S. empire. And even when it comes to most domestic issues, he refuses to stand up for Medicare for all, right? He claimed to be a Medicare for all supporter until he actually started running, this is the same thing that happened with Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg said that he supported Medicare for all. Then he started running a campaign, and he realized that he wouldn't get any money from the insurance industry if he kept supporting Medicare for all. So he switched. And Pete did the slimiest thing of changing the name and trying to co-opt the popularity of Medicare for all by calling it Medicare for all who want it, which is basically just another version of Obamacare. But Fetterman did the same thing. He said he was going to support Medicare for all, and then realized he wanted money from the insurance industry and changed his mind. And I mean, it's again him calling the phrase "Free Palestine" reprehensible is probably the second worst thing I've heard since this conflict started, since the Israel-Hamas war started. The first worst thing I've heard was from White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, the most condescending imperialist on the planet. Someone who treats you like shit and treats you so rude if you ask any critical questions of her or Joe Biden. This is what she had to say as airstrikes light up the Gaza skyline.
Well, there have been some members of Congress who have called for a ceasefire, and they have not gone as far as backing the administration's call for support for Israel.
So look, I've seen some.
They asked, what do you think about certain politicians calling for a ceasefire?
Some of those statements this weekend, and we're going to continue to be very clear. We believe they're wrong. We believe they're repugnant, and we believe they're disgraceful.
People calling for a ceasefire are repugnant and disgraceful. Again, I've never seen a better example of projection in my life. Never in my life. You know, I can't think of any better words to describe what the Biden administration is doing right now than repugnant and disgraceful. These are wealthy, rich, pampered people, pampered U.S. politicians like Karine Jean-Pierre, Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken, sitting in the U.S. empire and sponsoring and cheering on the mass murder of children. Cheering it on, giving them $8 billion extra to continue murdering a child every 15 minutes. And then when somebody in the U.S. says this is bad, we should call for peace, they smear those people. They attack those people. They call them terrorists. I can think of nothing more disgraceful, repugnant, and reprehensible than what John Fetterman, Karine Jean-Pierre, Anthony Blinken, and Joe Biden are doing. And they want to call us the repugnant ones for calling for peace. You people have a special place in hell, let me tell you. I don't know any better way to put it than that. If karma is real, a piano is going to fall on all your heads. Or a hellfire missile. That's what's raining down on the heads of Gaza children paid for by American tax money. I got some super chats. Daziga, thank you so much for the €2 super sticker. Appreciate that. Our second super sticker of the day. Obviously, all of our funding at the Midwestern Marx Institute comes from the super chats, from the Patreon supporters, from the community, from the audience, from the people. So really appreciate that. We've got something really, 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 really big. Probably the biggest thing to happen to the Institute ever is coming up here in another couple weeks. But we're going to need to fundraise for it. So all of your money will be put towards that. I promise it'll be worth it. It's really going to help the Institute blow up. I can't talk about it right now due to a contract and a non-disclosure agreement that I signed because it's a big deal what's going on. But there's going to be fundraising involved. So appreciate you all. Midwestern Marx is about to blast through the ceiling and really start accomplishing some of our major goals as an organization. Thank you, Daziga, again for gifting a Midwestern Marx membership. That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. Remember, whoever gets the gifted membership, You get access to our Discord when you become a YouTube member. The link is in the community tab. Maybe I have to update that, but it should be there. And then you also get access to Carlos's new book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, if you're a $10 member or above. So some people have no sense of scale. Absolutely. Thank you again, Deziga, for being a YouTube member, for gifting all these subs, and for the €2 super chat. I really appreciate that. And then Deziga, again, hit us with 4 in a row. Holy crap, really getting the ball rolling here. Appreciate you, Deziga, for gifting another membership. That's awesome. Keep building up those YouTube members. Let's keep building our community. If you're a YouTube member, please join the Discord. The Discord is fun. Great place to communicate with other Midwestern Marxists. And yeah, I remember when this was just a small TikTok profile. Happy to see you all succeed. You've been here from the beginning, Array. I appreciate you. You've been here forever. I'm all forgiving. I see that. We appreciate that a ton. This in Noah's pamphlet. I'm so excited. Yeah, Noah's pamphlet's going to be lit, honestly. Can you give us a hint? Yeah, I think I can say I was invited to go on a very big YouTube channel. That's all I'll say. I don't think that violates the non-disclosure agreement. I hope not. It's a very big YouTube channel, but I have to travel to get to the site of the shooting. So I'm gonna need probably help from the audience in paying for flights and stuff like that. Maybe not. The Patreon's been doing real well lately, and we've been trying to store all that money away. But it's gonna be huge. It's gonna be huge for us. So yeah, cannot wait for that. Someone said Zionists point out get super defensive when you point out their insistence that Israel equals all Jewish people just feeds into actual anti-Semitic myths. Oh yeah, they definitely do. They definitely do. But that is accurate. Fetterman, a Zionist pig. Free Palestine. Get Norm Finkelstein on a Midwestern Mark stream. We're working on it. That's in the works. It's been in the works for a while, but he will be on soon. He backstabbed on fracking. I didn't see that, but I believe it. I'm going to keep voting the way I get paid to vote. Yep, that's Fetterman's MO. Somebody said, oh, my 12-year-old was regurgitating CNN propaganda to me this morning. I had to have a 30-minute conversation to correct the Zionism he didn't understand he was promoting. It's sad that CNN was able to do that, but that's awesome. You know, that's the changing world that we live in. The more people like you who educate yourselves about this stuff, the more you're going to raise up kids and raise up the next generation who's educated about this stuff. Right. So Carlos and I say this right now, even if we don't see socialism in our lifetime, we're sowing the seeds for socialism to come about in the future. Right. Because we're going to raise our children in anti-imperialist households where they don't believe the corporate media that's constantly brainwashing them. So that's awesome to hear. Love it. Someone said earlier, did I see the Anthony Blinken getting protested by Code Pink? Someone else said it too. Yeah, we're going to cover that later, actually. So once they get through these super chats, here's to all we have going on. You bet. Thank you, Sebastian. The Midwestern Marx community is strong. We're going to grow soon. We're going to grow like crazy. We're going to reach new people. Our new people are going to teach their kids to be socialists and Marxists and anti-imperialists. And we will take down the American empire and the capitalist system that leads to all these horrific imperialist actions. Oh, thank you, Popers. Popers gifted 2 Midwestern Marx memberships. The last stream, he gave away 5 of them. So thank you so much, Popers. Really, really, really appreciate the support. Can't put into words how much I appreciate all of you for giving to the project. And I promise you we will use your money wisely, and we will use your money with the explicit goal of advancing the class struggle. Because unlike John Fetterman, who has his corporate donors who he has to be beholden to, Midwestern Marx is only beholden to the people. We only take funding from the people. And thus, our function is to serve the people. Fetterman takes money from corporate donors and lobbyists, and thus his function is to serve them. All right, let's check this out.
Competition in the Indo-Pacific and around the world.
That's Medea Benjamin for sure. Oh, yeah, I didn't even see her at first. She's the leader of Code Pink. Sort of like a badass, almost like old hippie type lady. It's like just the vibe she gives me, but great anti-imperialist, and Code Pink does a lot of great anti-imperialist stuff.
If the witness will suspend, and I ask that everyone again respect this. Recognize that people feel very passionately, but I ask that we have order in this hearing room.
Notice how they blur out the protesters. So Parenti talks about this in Inventing Reality. He says when these protests are covered, what they try and do is focus, is not show wide shots, not show how many protesters were actually there, which you've seen with a lot of the coverage of the giant protests for Palestine that have been going on. Most of the media shots are zoomed in, focused on 1, 2, 3 people or a small group of people, rather than these giant like drone shots, which have been posted on Twitter, where you see that there are actually thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Because the media wants to downplay these protests and convince people that they're not as big as they actually are. So you kind of see that here with them blurring out the protesters and not even really showing them, not conducting any interviews with them or anything like that. And what the media will do a lot of times too, of course, is if there's someone in the protest being violent, right? Or there were some Palestine protests the other day where someone was holding up like a swastika. The media just zooms in on that guy and then reports on that guy the whole time. Look at these violent protests. Look at these extremist protesters. Even if that's a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of the protesters who showed up, they use these tactics to try and demonize the protests and associate them with extremism and things that are unpopular. So, yeah, shout out to Code Pink, though, for interrupting old Blinken, one of the worst neoliberals on the planet today, one of the leaders of the empire. Shout out to Olav. I just paid for Mark's tier and Patreon. That's awesome. Thank you, Olav. Make sure you get a copy of Carlos's book, The Purity, Fetish, and the Crisis of Western Marxism, an ebook copy. So make sure you take advantage of that. And also make sure you join the Discord. Make sure you get all those perks. I want you all to be using those perks. Super sticker from Aaron Young. Let's go. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the super stickers. Thank you all for supporting our show, supporting what we do here. Yeah, can't put into words how much I appreciate it. I know I've said that a lot of times, but it is true. It is really true. Okay, since we're talking about protests and protesters now, the biggest march for Palestinian solidarity in history is expected to be held on Saturday. Around 100,000 people are expected to converge in Washington, D.C. to demand an end to the U.S. funding of Israel and the genocide in Gaza. So you can only imagine how much the corporate media is going to try and downplay this, right? You can only imagine how much they're going to try and make it seem like there are just a few protesters there. And if there were violent extremists. You know, all these protesters were bad. All these protesters were anti-Semitic. These were anti-Semitic protests in general. When, of course, the vast majority of the people there are just going to be opposed to genocide. They're going to be people who stand with Palestine. But, of course, the Zionists always smear those who stand against them as being anti-Semites, which is why it's important to not be anti-Semitic and understand that anti-Semitism actually helped drive Zionism in the 30s and 40s. But either way, really excited to see this going on. The U.S. sends $3.8 billion in response to the genocide of Palestinian people, and Biden just committed another $8 billion, which we're going to cover a bit later on the show. But taking place, it's organized by a broad coalition of Palestinian, Arab American, and anti-imperialist organizations, including the Palestinian Youth Movement, the Answer Coalition, the American Muslim Alliance, the People's Forum, National Students for Justice in Palestine, Al-Auda, the Palestine Right to Return Coalition, U.S. Palestinian Community Network, U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, and Maryland to Palestine. It's also been endorsed by 350 organizations. We endorse it too. Tens of thousands of attendees are driving by bus, so you can drive by bus to get there. Anyone who lives in the Washington, D.C. area who's able to go to this, I would so go. I'm about ready to hop on a bus right now and go if I didn't have a million things going on tomorrow. But yeah, the United States funds Israel with around $4 billion a year. Biden's been attempting to push through a massive spending bill of $105 billion, allocating funding to both Israel and Ukraine, two proxies of the U.S., two proxies of the empire. And this should show you the fact that Biden's trying to push through 150 or 105 billion for Israel and Ukraine should show you exactly what Israel and Ukraine are to the U.S. empire. They are neo-colonial outposts. I mean, the Atlantic Council article from a while back said, and Zelensky said straight up, that they want to turn Ukraine into a big Israel. Which means an apartheid state that serves as a neo-colonial outpost of the U.S. Right? So this spending bill should show you exactly how the Biden administration and the U.S. see Ukraine and Israel. They are proxies of the empire. They are outposts for the U.S. empire. And the U.S. has done a lot to maintain those outposts. So solidarity with anybody going to the march. Do we have anyone in the audience who's going to the march? That would be really awesome. Let me know if you're going, or even if you just want to go. I'm sure everybody wants to go, but not in Washington, but going to the events on Saturday and Sunday in my city. That's awesome. Yeah, it's one of those times where I wish I lived closer to a big city. So I could travel. I'm pretty far away from any big cities. Maybe Iowa City is kind of close to me. They might be having some protests, but we'll see. Armand is going. Okay, cool. Victor the Van is going. Homestead is going. Wow, awesome. Screenshot it. So the Pale King might go. All right. Sounds really, really cool. I hope you guys enjoy your time there and report back how it went. I can't wait to hear about it. Solidarity with you. Thanks for making the trip out there. Rachel Riley, the TV presenter in the UK, she did falsely claim that this Jewish group protesting for Palestine had said jihad now. This is the same woman who tried to smear Jeremy Corbyn. What do you know? What do you know? The same lady who tried to smear Corbyn as an anti-Semite for standing for Palestine is making up lies about Jewish groups who support Palestine. Crazy. These people are ghouls. These people are professional liars. Sebastian's going too. Let's go. Enjoy it, Sebastian. You should take some videos. You don't have to, but if you do, that'd be cool. We'll play them on the stream. Won't be in Washington, city near me. I want to go. Comrade is going. She's watches a lot. Is going. She watches a lot of times. Nice. Greg, glad to hear it. Glad to hear we got so many people who are going. In Montreal, we have protests every Sunday. Wow, nice. Sadly, I am but a common European and can't come. Thank you again for the super chat, Jaziga. Appreciate that. Have there been a lot of protests in Europe? I'm curious because obviously there have been a lot in the Arab country. Well, yeah, of course there have been a lot in Europe. We covered the protests that were going on in the UK and France. But the government's obviously been cracking down much harder in Europe. They don't have the same reverence for freedom of speech that we have in the U.S., which, by the way, I know as communists, the American Constitution is a bourgeois constitution, right? It needs to be at least altered or revolutionized when we move to a socialist society. But comrades in Mexico were telling Carlos that to the extent that we can use our constitutional rights to protect ourselves, right? To the extent that we can say we're supposed to have freedom of speech, why are we getting censored? That we should do that we should utilize the rights that were supposed to be granted by our government. And even though we know there is no real freedom of speech, we should still use that to try and protect ourselves when we get censored. So I don't know if that helps anybody or if anyone's getting censored recently, but yeah, there you go. My work season is wrapping up these next 2 weeks. Too much overtime to go. Yeah, I feel you. Oh, I'm in a similar situation. Yeah, so Biden has given $8 billion to Israel, or pledged $8 billion to Israel. He wants to pledge even more. And there's also been a huge military buildup in the region. U.S. ships going down, arms going down, and more missile strikes at Iranian proxies in Syria. So we could be looking at potentially a new sort of Arab versus Israel and U.S. war breaking out. We'll see how involved countries like Syria, Iran, Lebanon, the militias like Hezbollah or the Houthis in Yemen. We'll see how much more involved they get. Yemen and the Houthis actually have declared war on Israel and started firing rockets at them or missiles at them, which we'll cover later. But yeah, absolutely wild to see even more aid being pledged to Israel as economic conditions are getting worse in the U.S. But of course, this is capitalist imperialism, right? Biden is not actually a politician who serves the people. Biden is an imperialist. He serves his capitalist donors. He serves his lobbyists. He serves the ruling class. He does not serve you. He does not serve you. That is a sham. That is a joke. That is a propaganda trick to pretend that U.S. politicians serve the American people. They serve capital. They serve the ruling capitalist class. They serve giant banks. They serve multinational corporations. Also, the U.S. has been firing at Iranian proxies who have now fired back. But these were proxies located in Syria. So what this shows is a giant escalation by the U.S. in this region, a giant military buildup in this region as they commit support to Israel that they've, of course, been funding year after year. But now we're going to see a huge increase, a huge bump in U.S. funding and involvement in this region. And if more Arab countries or like if Iran gets pulled in, Iran is not an Arab country, but if more of the countries in this region get pulled in, we could be looking at a huge escalation in the war or a huge sort of Arab versus U.S. war. And not only has the U.S. been building up military capacity in the region, but the Houthis in Yemen, like I said, have launched strikes against Israel and shown their solidarity for the Palestinian cause. And Mint Press News reported that they even, all out or straight up declared war on Israel. That they said, we are at war with the Zionist entity. And, we support the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian resistance. So the Houthis are a militia that exists in Yemen, sort of like Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they're an anti-imperialist, almost, they have like socialistic leaning economic policy, but very anti-imperialist. And of course, everybody knows that the U.S. has been funding and sponsoring a genocide in Yemen, filling up Saudi jets who have then gone and bombed Yemeni water sanitation facilities. So the country has just been decimated for the last more than 30 years, but the last, past few decades at least, by the United States and by U.S. imperialism, by their bombing campaigns, by coups that ousted socialistic governments in Yemen. So this has allowed the Houthis to grow, the Houthi militias to grow, just like the U.S. and Israel launching missiles at Lebanon has allowed Hezbollah to grow, just like Israel launching missiles into Gaza allows Hamas to grow. Because when you launch missiles at people and you kill their brothers and sisters and friends and children, they're more likely to join a resistance militia and try and fight you and try and kick you out. So now there's all these groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in West Asia who hate the U.S., who hate imperialism, and have been watching their countries get bombed by U.S. imperialism and by Israel, which are one and the same, for the past however many decades now. And they're sick of it. And they're saying, forget Israel, we side with the Palestinians, and, we might all out declare war on them. And as I said, Mint Press News reported that Yemen actually, straight up declared war on Israel, or said they're officially going to enter the war, which, of course they are. They're firing missiles at Israel. They're launching military attacks. So yeah, the Arab world is uniting against Israel, uniting against this neo-colonial outpost of the U.S. as the U.S. is building up military capacity in Israel. So you see how people could look at this and say, we might be headed for a huge war in this region. And especially Israel. Israel's got to be freaking out right now. Right? They got to be freaking out that they're going to isolate and alienate all their neighbors and everyone around them who are going to converge and turn on them and prevent them from committing a genocide. Extreme forms of repression cause extreme forms of resistance. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Right? I mean, somebody made a map of Israel taking over the United States. Imagine if Israel came here and took over the entire United States except for like California and a couple parts of the eastern United States. You don't think that there would be Christian militias, that there would be American militias who would take up arms and fight back? If they had us all trapped in California and were launching missiles at us, you don't think there would be nationalistic militias who would rise up and fight back? No, of course there would be. Any place where you see the kind of repression and murder that the Palestinians have been subjected to, you're going to have people who rise up. You're going to have people who take up arms and try and fight back against that repression. You know, violence is often people's last resort, but they will resort to violence if they have no other option. All right, before this next segment, I got to grab my water because it's a bit of a longer one, but thank you all for the super chats that we've gotten thus far. Hopefully, I missed one of them. We don't have that in Slovenia. Dang it. You don't have the protests in Slovenia. You don't have the harsh anti-Palestinian activist laws. Hopefully the latter. But appreciate the super chats. Thank you to everyone for the super chats. Again, all of our funding at Midwestern Marks comes from you, the people. Patreon.com/Midwestern Marks. The super chats. There's a buy me a coffee. That just goes to my bank account, though, I'm pretty sure. So don't do buy me a coffee. Do Patreon or do buy me a coffee. I don't care. You can send me money. All goes to the same place. Hi from Greece. Very cool. Very cool. Hello from the U.S. Yeah, nobody wants to die, but for some people, just living is worse than fighting. Yeah, and that's when the U.S. says, like, they push this ideology that people in the Orient, people in Vietnam, they pushed this during the Vietnam War, the Palestinian Arabs, they don't really care about life. You know, they don't value human life as much as we do here in the West, right? They're okay with just dying, with just giving up their lives. It's not true. Everybody wants to live. Every human being has that survival instinct. Nobody wants to die, right? It's people who are forced into this situation where they have to fight because fighting is better than living in the conditions that they're in. Okay, I gotta go grab a drink of water before we get into this next segment, but I'll play something cool for you all. Gosh, am I gonna get taken off the internet if I play? Actually, hold on, I have an idea. I want to play my match for you guys, but I don't want to get taken down because it's technically behind a paywall.
Yeah, Shanice. Yeah. Your mouth is moving.
But I made an edited version that I should be able to play. I can play for you now. So this is the match that I had like 2-3 weeks ago now. It was at this like wrestling showcase that we put together to show people Greco-Roman wrestling. The guy I'm wrestling was pretty good. He had beaten me last time. But I was able to get the dub this time. So enjoy this.
Some clips from my match.
Enjoy this while I go pee and get some water.
Some clips from my match this weekend. Defending a gut wrench on bottom. Frog style jutsu. Ouch my ribs. Ouch my hip. I win. Back to the feet. Give me your head. Got the angle. Two. Now it's my turn to cut red. Two. Two. One more two. And the crowd goes wild. Need one more point. Slip. Slip. 2, and I win. Flex for the homies and mom. A point up for my lost buddy whose dad is in the stands. Some clips from my match this weekend. Defending a gut wrench on bottom. Frog style jutsu. Ouch my ribs. Ouch my hip. I win. Back to the feet. Give me your head. Got the angle. Two. Now it's my turn to cut leg. 2. 2. One more 2. And the crowd goes wild.
Did I win? Nice work. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Smelly paywall. Sorry. Flow Wrestling's got to make money too. Expect a Naruto Eddie meme in the Discord later. Yes, please. I can't wait for it. I need that. Do you guys know that my junior year in college, when I qualified for nationals the first time, so the last 2 years I had failed to qualify for nationals in heartbreaking fashion, in like triple overtime in the match to see who goes. So my junior year, I finally made it to nationals. And for those of you who watch Naruto, you're going to like this. I took off my ankle bands that they give you, and I held them out and dropped them like I was Rock Lee dropping the ankle weights. And then I hit the Rock Lee pose. And actually, the school's graphic designers edited a video of me where it was like Naruto music playing in the background. And it said like Eddie Smith. There was like fire coming out of my hand. And I was like, well, Rock Lee technically can't use fire because he's the least talented ninja, but the hardest working. He doesn't have the ability to use what's it called? Ninjutsu or whatever they call it. But either way, I did an anime pose before Israel Adesanya made it cool. So you got to drop that in the Discord, Eddie. I definitely will. I'll try. I don't know if I can find the GIF anymore, but I can definitely find the original video of me doing it. There it is. Here's me doing it without the music and the cool editing. This is my wrestling Twitter account. And you see I dropped the... Look, this guy's a nerd. This guy loves it. You know, all the Naruto nerds were like, let's go. It's Rock Lee. Chakra. Yes, Rock Lee can't use chakra. Thank you. I haven't watched Shippuden in a while. He's taijutsu. Yes, yes. Only taijutsu. Can't use ninjutsu or genjutsu. Yes, I'm glad you guys like that. I'll definitely drop that in the Discord, especially if I can find the edited version. LMAO, no way. Yes, I am a big nerd. Always been a nerd and a wrestler. Okay, I want to talk about this next. There's this really good series of articles published on Consortium News. That's not what I wanted. Did I grab the wrong article? Damn it. Hold on. I grabbed the wrong article. But this is a series of what's going to be 5 articles. Right now there's 3 about the internal developments within Israeli politics recently, which helps you add context to what's going on and really, really helps you understand what's happening here. So 3-part series so far, going to be a 5-part series by Dan Steinbach, published on Consortium News and elsewhere. But he talks about first this strategy of tension, which is basically Israel's strategy of uniting the nation against a common geopolitical enemy so that political repression and decreasing economic conditions can continue at home and the government can still have the support of the people. So basically, as economic conditions are deteriorating for the Israeli working class, and as the politics are becoming more extremist and more repressive, they're trying to unite the Israeli people against Hamas, against the Palestinians, against the common enemy, in order to maintain power. And Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has faced lots of corruption allegations, allegations for bribery, tons of things related to corruption. And legal scholars say that if he's not in power, he'll be charged. So he could literally be indicted and arrested and charged with corruption if he's no longer the prime minister of Israel. So he himself is desperate to remain in power, and he's continually allowed his cabinet and the positions of power around him to fill up with absolute far-right extremists, people who can only really be described as fascists, anti-Arab religious extremists. So this shows you how Israel uses Hamas to manipulate the narrative, not only for the world, but for their own people. They try and create this common Israeli enemy of Hamas, and it allows them to do whatever they want, essentially. And of course, we know the war is not actually against Hamas. Their goal is to displace the Palestinians and move them into Egypt. And some people have now looked at this situation and even argue that Hamas is a psyop, right? That Hamas has been promoted and backed by Israel in the U.S. because it allows Israel to create this common enemy of the Israeli people. I don't think that's accurate. I haven't seen enough evidence for that yet, but it's a thesis that's worth discussing, a thesis that's worth listening to. And if you want to hear somebody argue that thesis, or at least that idea, this person isn't saying that it's 100% true, but they put the idea out there. Brian Berletic of the New Atlas has said just be careful when it comes to Hamas and be skeptical of what goes on. So so now literal extremist right-wingers have come to populate the Israeli government during this strategy of tension. The far right in Israeli politics has been legitimized. You have all these horrific people who are now in power, people who have called for the mass displacement of Arabs. The minister of energy said that, all electricity and gas and food should be cut off from Gaza. Just the most horrific sort of far right extremists imaginable are now increasingly coming to prominence in Israel, and have increasingly come to prominence in Israel. This has been going on for the past few years. And if you follow James Ray on TikTok, if we have some TikTok people out there, follow James, because he's also been covering this on TikTok on an almost weekly basis. So here's part 2 of that same series of articles that talks about autocracy and how the state in Israel has become increasingly authoritarian, increasingly extremist, increasingly repressive and violent, as Israel tries to justify it by uniting their population against Palestinian Arabs. So you see what's going on here? As the state becomes increasingly dictatorial, repressive, and violent, and as the state becomes filled with extremists, they are continually using Hamas as a scapegoat, right? Using Hamas to say, no, we have to do this, right? We have to move towards extremism. We have to move more towards dictatorship. We have to allow economic conditions to deteriorate and move towards a more neoliberal economic system because Hamas, right? Demonize Hamas and it allows you to do whatever you want. So recently, the ability of Israeli courts were to protect Palestinians. Any ability that they had to do so was basically erased with the recent legislation that passed. And this was even protested by Israelis, right? There were large protests by the Israeli population when this was going on. And here you go. This is those protesters demonstrating against that because they saw this move as dictatorial or autocratic. This bill was pushed by anti-Arab, pro-settlement, anti-peace parties who are now in power. So these extremist groups, these sort of extreme Zionist, hyper-religious political parties in Israel were the ones who pushed for this, for the courts to basically not be able to protect Palestinians at all. And they were able to push it through because they now have power in government. And people have argued that this is this sort of far-right extremism and fascism expressed by these anti-Arab political groups in Israel is the natural progression of a settler colonial apartheid state, right? If you found a state on top of Palestine and you make your state's main goal pushing people off of their land, stealing their homes, or blowing up their homes and building new ones for yourself on top of the rubble, right? Eventually, that project is going to lead to fascism and extremism, because the only ideology that can justify what the Israelis are doing right now, the only ideology that can justify this kind of violence is a fascistic religious extremist ideology that says Jews are the chosen people and Palestinian Arabs are lesser than us and don't deserve rights, and we should be allowed to kill them. So this author was actually has spent a lot of time in Israel interviewing both Palestinians and Israelis, and he talks about the increase in fascist ideology that he saw among the Jewish settlers. So again, as these people are pushing Palestinians off their land, the ideology that they have becomes increasingly fascistic, becomes increasingly violent to justify what they're doing. And he said it was the opposite among Arabs, who were increasingly hopeless and increasingly more likely to join an armed resistance group like Hamas because they're having their land stolen and they see no hope for the future. Whereas the Israelis, the fascists, see, great hope for the future. They see themselves pushing all of the Palestinians off of their land. So in the early 1970s, there were, where's this statistic? I can't find where it is in the article, but in the 1970s, there were barely 2,000 settlers in the West Bank. Today, there are 500,000 settlers in the West Bank. Right? So as the settler colonialism has continued, the fascism and the extremism in ideology has increased. Base and superstructure. Because these settlers need to tell themselves that they're God's chosen people. They need to tell themselves these religious extremist ideas in order to justify demolishing Palestinian homes. Same as manifest destiny, right? It's just like the manifest destiny that came about among the American settlers when they were pushing the indigenous Native Americans off their land, so-called Native Americans off their land. They came up with this manifest destiny idea that it's our job, ordained from God, to expand westward. We got to keep going west, and anybody who was already settled there, we got to push them off their land because that's what God would want, right? That became their ideology. The ideology just was used to justify the actions, and the same way that this fascistic religious extremist ideology is used in Israel to justify their settler colonialism. So the last article that's been published so far in this series, which I left a comment on, is the best one, in my opinion, Far-Right Terror, which focuses on the actions of these extremist groups that have risen to prominence in Israel over the past few decades. So people need to understand that there's a range of opinion among Israeli settlers. Right? Not all Israeli settlers think the same way. A lot of them are more fascistic and more extremist than others, more anti-Arab than others. And during the 70s and 80s, a lot of this far-right extremism began to grow in prominence, and you had terror groups like the Jewish Underground that were formed in opposition to moves to create peace between Israel and other Arab countries, because these people don't want peace. These extremists want to continue the project of ethnically cleansing Palestinians. So a major leader at the time was this Rabbi Meir Kahane guy. I don't know how to say his name, but the author describes him as a man, the most hate-filled man that he's ever met. I had never met anyone filled as hate. I had never met anyone as full of hate and fully expected him to die violently. And this guy's ideology, this guy's hateful anti-Arab ideology has become very popular in Israel. He was killed, he was assassinated in the 90s, but his ideology has lived on. It's called like Kahaneism or something like that. But it's basically anti-Arab extremism. And if you want to know what this Kahane guy is about, this guy whose ideology now has a bunch of influence in Israel. Here's him talking in the 90s.
My answer, to transfer the Arabs out of this country. By force? Hopefully through compensation and their willingness to leave. If compensation doesn't work and they're not willing? Through force. The same kind of force that the Poles and the Czechs used against the ethnic Germans in 1945, when after having suffered at the hand which brought in Hitler, they decided in their own way never again. Can you believe that would be the final solution to the Palestinian problem? I'm not talking about final solutions. I'm talking about a problem that has to be solved. If they're in this country, they will vote the Jews out of a state.
So what's nice about these extremists, and this is what a lot of Palestinians have said about Netanyahu and the people around them, is that they're honest about what they want, right? They're honest about their intentions, whereas a lot of the moderates, so-called moderates, will kind of try and hide it, right? And they'll endorse all these bombings of the Palestinians and displacement of the Palestinians. But then they won't say out loud, yeah, we need to get rid of the Palestinians. They don't deserve rights. We need our own state where Arab people aren't allowed to live. They won't openly endorse apartheid and ethnic cleansing, but these people will. The Israeli extremists absolutely will. So you hear this guy say the quiet part out loud there. We need to expel all of the Palestinian Arabs because if they have voting rights, the state of Israel as it exists now will cease to exist. Right? So we need to enforce an apartheid. We need to deprive people of their rights, or he even wants to move them. He wants to ethnically cleanse them so they don't vote against the kind of government that I want, this authoritarian, imperialistic, Zionist entity. Right? He wants to remove all Arabs because if he doesn't, Arab people will make up the majority. Right? If Arab people are given voting rights, they're not going to continue voting for the kind of stuff that Israel is doing. That's why they have to enforce an apartheid and systematically deprive those people of their rights. And that's why ultimately they want to completely displace the Arab Palestinians because they view them as a thorn in their side.
If they're out.
This is the ideology that's extremely popular in the Israeli government now. So ask yourself, or if you found yourself asking over the past few weeks, how could anyone do this? How could anybody justify this? This is how. This is their ideology. They know that if Palestinian Arabs aren't either exterminated or if they're given political rights, the state of Israel will cease to exist as it currently does. And maintaining the state of Israel, the Zionist entity, is goal numero uno for these people, and expanding it.
Outside of the country, they will hate us from the outside, and I'd rather have a distant hating neighbor than a close one.
What about you? What about you? Aren't you a hateful neighbor? Why don't you ever look in the mirror, fella? Either way, this is shows how politics in Israel have changed over the years. So like I said, there's been a growth in far-right extremism, but this graph really shows you how bad the growth in far-right extremism has actually been. So when Israel was founded in 1949, this was the right wing, the blue. The dark red here was labor, and the pink is the left. And when Israel was founded, there were a lot of it was called labor Zionism. There was a lot of socialistic economic policy in Israel, not for the Palestinians, of course, but for the Israeli citizens. There was low levels of inequality and stuff like that. But over time, you saw that change, right? You see a dip in the left and a dip. Labor looks to be about equally popular in 1973, but the left is declining and the right is growing. And look at the change from 1973 to 2022. This is how much of the Israeli government is now controlled by the far right, the extreme right. So this is why they're much more brazen in their mass murder of Palestinians and in their ethnic cleansing than they've ever been. Because they have literal anti-Arab fascists in their government, absolute extremists in their government, and they're able to act with impunity. The U.S. just says, good, Israel, keep going. Keep going. We don't care if fascists have taken over your government and they're now just openly, brazenly committing an ethnic cleansing. Israel has a right to exist. Yeah. Any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. So these people have also been emboldened by the United States. And that's what this author goes on to point out, that there is a correlation between the growth in the extreme right and the growth of U.S. funding and U.S. aid to Israel. Because the U.S. finds allies and far-right extremists wherever it goes around the world. These far-right extremists are more likely to launch missiles at Syria and Iran and Lebanon and the U.S.'s other enemies in the region. So the U.S. prefers them to the more moderate wing. And this is what they've propped up in Israel. This is what they've allowed to take place in Israel. They've allowed brazen fascists like the people surrounding Netanyahu, or proto-fascists like Netanyahu himself, to take over the Israeli government and commit a genocide, commit an ethnic cleansing with essentially impunity. Right? How is this any different from 1940s Germany, 1930s Germany, when the Nazis took over, when the far-right extremists had control of the government and started ethnically cleansing the people that they don't like? Right? This is fascism, guys. It's fascism. The U.S. sponsored a fascist takeover of Israel and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and that's why history will look back at anybody who supported this so poorly. Right? This is fascism, similar to 2014 Ukraine, by the way, but Israel is a fascist dictatorship propped up by the United States. And the article goes on to say that a lot of the Israeli budget is now going to fund ultra-religious groups like the Haredi groups, rather than putting it towards economic development or anything else. And Israel's economic development has been greatly slowing in recent years, which is why they've gone with this strategy of tension that he calls it, where they're trying to demonize Hamas, trying to demonize the Palestinians so that the Israeli working class won't be like, hey, our conditions aren't that good. Our economic conditions are getting worse. Why don't you do something about that? The far-right extremists say, shut up, shut up, shut up. Look, let's go get Hamas. So yeah, there's a lesson about internal Israeli politics. I recommend everybody go read those articles on Consortium News. I just gave a brief summary, and obviously internal Israeli politics is not something I'm an expert on, not something I've been following day to day, but I do think that's important context and an important read. If anyone wants to learn more about that. You see the video of the rabbi getting beat up by the IDF? Yes, I did see that. Israel isn't even safe for Israelis. All right, y'all. I got practice in 15 minutes. I brought this right up to the wire. I did this as long as I could because I wanted to hang out with y'all, and we had important things to discuss today. But thank you so much for all the super chatters. Thank you to everyone who liked, shared, subscribed, commented on the stream. You all helped a ton, boosting us in the algorithm and stuff like that. Appreciate everyone for participating. Continue to show solidarity with Palestine. Continue to fight the information war, get real information out there, and combat propaganda. Continue to educate yourself and others. We will win, folks. I promise you. If we organize, fight, and educate, we will win. All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for learning with me. We'll see you on the next one. Solidarity.
Without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.